Joining us now to talk particularly about the Regulatory Standards Bill, its report back, and something of a triumph, I have to say, for ACT Party leader, a personal one. David Seymour joins us now. David, thank you so much for joining us. Lovely to have you on again, mate.
Hey, you too, and thanks for having me on the show. It's great to see the platform going strong. You haven't been shut down yet.
Wow. Listen, the broadcast, I mean, have you got a view on that issue of the BSA deciding after 3.5 years that they're going to extend their purview to the platform and other online platforms?
Well, I have to say it is up to Paul Goldsmith. He's the responsible minister, and in this government we try not to trespass on each other's territory. So I respect Paul, but I mean I have to say it's pretty extraordinary because the implications of what they're saying are that anybody who's transmitting sound or pictures in real time, so anybody with a live stream on Facebook is somehow in their purview. And what's more, Parliament clearly did not anticipate the internet in 1989. Parliament has had many opportunities to legislate that the Broadcasting Standards Authority should police the internet, such as in 2015 when it passed the Harmful Digital Communications Act, which I opposed, by the way, on free speech grounds. But it didn't choose to use the Broadcasting Standards Authority. Parliament actually decided to have an approved authorised agency, which ended up being NetSafe, to do that job. So it's a pretty long bow to think that Parliament wanted the Broadcasting Standards Authority to police the internet, because when it created them, it didn't know about the internet, and when Parliament did know about the internet, it didn't ask them to do it. So I would have thought that they're on pretty shaky ground, but what would I know? I'm just a dumb engineer. I'm no lawyer.
No, nonetheless, I think you underrepresent your skills, Mr. Seymour, because at the end of the day, ACT and New Zealand First will have a view on this particular issue, as I'm sure it'll turn up around the cabinet table at some stage. Nonetheless, thank you for that insight. Well, just on that though, you do broadcasts, so don't you? You put out podcasts. I'll give you a good
Yeah,
examples.
I mean, look,
Does that
particularly
get
during
called into
COVID,
purview?
we haven't done live stream so much recently, but during COVID, because we were really shut out more than usual from the mainstream media, we actually ran our own shows, and it's funny because some of them came up on sort of back reels of YouTube, and I'd almost forgotten that we used to do this. And I think it was important that during COVID times people were able to do that. They all had different views, but you could imagine a Broadcasting Standards Authority saying, well, actually, you guys are spreading misinformation, you're undermining the government's public health response, we want you shut down. And that's why I think it's critical that they are put back in their box.
Yep. No. Okay. All right. Thank you for that. Listen, this week, talking about back in the box, I mean, I sometimes get the view that the Broadcasting Standards Authority is starting to find themselves irrelevant as more people drift away from the mainstream media, which of course they do regulate. But I can understand why they drift away from the mainstream media, David, because I've been reading Radio New Zealand to do news to do with the Regulatory Standards Bill being reported back from Parliament. And as you'd be well aware, Radio New Zealand have tended to lionise your critics rather than you. Did they actually ever approach you over this issue before they decided to go and find a whole series of academics who hate you?
Yeah, in fairness, they do interview me, but I can also appreciate that their basic view is that New Zealand should be ruled by a sort of deep state elite of academics and public servants and grandees 100 years old, and from the legal establishment, and that those sort of people are worth listening to. And so, of course, they write this really dismissive stuff. I would like to think, I speak for people up and down this country who are just tired of this attitude that if in doubt, we will make another rule and it will make you pay fees, have inspections. It will make you potentially give up on projects, give up on using your property to its maximum value. But you know what? We've made a rule in Wellington, and the little people will pay. That's essentially what we get. So just yesterday, Andrew Hoggard, the Minister for Food Safety, and another good ACT MP, said, look, we're getting rid of the requirement that you have an inspection if you want to bake cakes at home and sell them. 11 years ago, the government of the day introduced this requirement because, hey, you know, what's the cost of another rule? Well, zero to us, something to the little people out there, but, you know, we'll just put the cost on them. And, you know, when we get dozens of people approach the Ministry for Regulation, say, this is ridiculous, it costs $1,000 to get an inspection, to have a cake baked in my house, nobody's getting sick, there's no real danger here, why do we have to pay this? So we're just getting rid of that rule. But there are so many rules like that where people in power have just said, if in doubt, make a rule. And, you know, people will just bear the cost. The Regulatory Standards Bill essentially says if you want to impair somebody's property rights, or if you want to put a cost onto somebody, you have to justify it. And this has driven a lot of people mad because all the government departments, you know, they briefed their ministers and they went to war against me and the Ministry for Regulation. Even the Ministry for Regulation at one point said they didn't support the bill because the Wellington people do not want to have to justify putting costs on people all up and down New Zealand. But, you know, the bill is going to go through, and I believe in the long term it will become part of New Zealand's fabric, that people do actually have rights. And if you want to intervene and put costs on them, you've got to make the case for it.
The primary media attention wasn't so much on the effects or not of what the bill will do in the commercial world, but it was also upon somehow you were launching the Treaty Principles, the Treaty Principles Bill Part 2 through this process of the Regulatory Standards Bill. That must have been enormously annoying to you, but the argument seemed to be that unless it's got Te Tiriti o Waitangi involved in its aims and objects, then all legislation must be somehow wrong and immoral, which is the criticism that came of the Regulatory Standards Bill. At the end of the day, do you expect that kind of agitation to occur for all legislation, or is it just because you did it, David?
I definitely think that there's a sort of follow-on. After the Treaty Principles Bill, there was a whole lot of people who were angry about that. There were people that had the machinery built up to orchestrate these big submissions or numerous submissions to the Select Committee. And so, of course, when all you've got to hammer everything seems like a nail, so they just sort of took all of that campaign and added it to a new bill. Or targeted it at a new bill. So I can understand that, but I mean, the substance of it, the Treaty Principles Bill was about taking the Treaty of Waitangi and saying the principles are what the treaty said, that the government has a right to govern, that we all have a right to our property, and that the third article said we're all equal before the law. That was one project. This is a totally different project which says if the government wants to make a rule, then it needs to justify that the benefits of this new rule outweigh the costs, and that any imposition on your property be compensated. Because if you want to achieve a goal, like, for example, you want earthquake safety, then the question is, how do you justify putting this enormous cost onto building owners up and down New Zealand? You know, the cost that they put onto building owners was tens of billions of dollars. And that impairment of people's property, that cost put onto people was never justified. What we're saying with the Treaty Principles Bill is that those costs need to be properly considered, and if people are going to pay a cost, then they should be compensated. Yeah.
Okay, so the Reg Standards Bill's going to come back. It's got a few amendments to it. Were most of those amendments as a consequence of making it better, or were they just as part of the negotiation process between the coalition partners?